Norway, a country of northern Europe that occupies the western half of the Scandinavian Peninsula. The nation known for its high living standards, with per capita income among the highest in world, and that too with low income disparity, is one of the happiest places to live on earth. At a time when growing income inequality among citizens, and poor public facilities such as healthcare and education have become a political hot topic in developed nations, the region known as Scandinavia is seen by many scholars as a role model for economic opportunity and equality. So let's look into how the Norwegian economy became so big, and learn whether Norway is a model economy and can its model be implemented in other nations. The economy of Norway is a developed mixed economy with state ownership in strategic areas. Although sensitive to global business cycles, the economy of Norway has shown robust growth since the start of the industrial era. The country has a very high standard of living compared with other European countries, and a strongly integrated welfare system. Norway's modern manufacturing and welfare system rely on a financial reserve produced by exploitation of natural resources, particularly North Sea oil. According to United Nations data for 2016, Norway together with Luxembourg and Switzerland, are the only three countries in the world having a GDP per capita above $70,000, and are neither island nations nor microstates. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, Norway's economy was largely based on agriculture, timber, and fishing. Norwegians typically lived under conditions of considerable scarcity, though famine was rare. The economic conditions in Norway did not lend themselves to the formation of feudal system, though several kings did reward land to loyal subjects who became knights. Self-owning farmers were, and continue to be, the main unit of work in Norwegian agriculture, but leading up to the 19th century, farmers ran out of land available for farming. Many agricultural families were reduced to poverty as tenant farmers, and served as the impetus for emigration to North America. Industrialization in Norway came with the first textile mills that were built in middle of the 19th century. But the first large industrial enterprises came into formation when entrepreneurs' politics led to the founding of banks to serve those needs. Industries also offered employment for a large number of individuals who were displaced from the agricultural sector. As wages from industry exceeded those from agriculture, the shift started a long-term trend of reduction in cultivated land and rural population patterns. The working class became a distinct phenomenon in Norway, with its own neighborhoods, culture, and politics. After World War II, the Norwegian Labour Party, with Inge Gerhardsen as Prime Minister, embarked on a number of social democratic reforms aimed at flattening the income distribution, eliminating poverty, ensuring social services such as retirement, medical care, and disability benefits to all, and putting more of the capital into the public trust. Highly progressive income taxes, the introduction of value-added tax, and a wide variety of special surcharges and taxes made Norway one of the most heavily taxed economies in the world. Authorities particularly taxed discretionary spending, levying special taxes on automobiles, tobacco, alcohol, cosmetics, etc. Norway's long-term social democratic policies, extensive governmental tracking of information, and the homogeneity of its population lent themselves particularly well for economic study, and academic research from Norway proved to make significant contributions to the field of macroeconomics during this era. When Norway became a petroleum exporting country, The economic effects came under further study. In May 1963, Norway asserted sovereign rights over natural resources in its sector of the North Sea. Exploration started on the 19th of July 1966, when ocean traveler drilled its first well. Oil was first encountered at the Balder oil field at flank of the Utsira High, about 190 kilometers west of Stavanger, in 1967. Initial exploration was fruitless, until Ocean Viking found oil on the 21st of August 1969. By the end of 1969, it was clear that there were large oil and gas reserves in the North Sea. The first oil field was Ekofisk, which produced 427,442 barrels of crude in 1980. Since then, large natural gas reserves have also been discovered. Against the backdrop of the Norwegian referendum to not join the European Union, the Norwegian Ministry of Industry moved quickly to establish a national energy policy. Norway decided to stay out of OPEC, keep its own energy prices in line with world markets, and spend the revenue, known as the currency gift, wisely. The Norwegian government established its own oil company, Statoil, and awarded drilling and production rights to Norsk Hydro and the newly formed Saga Petroleum. Petroleum exports are taxed at a marginal rate of 78%. The North Sea turned out to present many technological challenges for production and exploration, and Norwegian companies invested in building capabilities to meet these challenges. A number of engineering and construction companies emerged from the remnants of the largely lost shipbuilding industry, creating centers of competence in Stavanger and the western suburbs of Oslo. Stavanger also became the land-based staging area for the offshore drilling industry. Presently North Sea is past its peak oil production. New oil and gas fields have been found and developed in the large Norwegian areas of the Norwegian Sea and the Barents Sea. In September 1972, the Norwegian Parliament put to a referendum the question whether Norway should join the European Union. The proposal was turned down with a slim margin. The Norwegian government proceeded to negotiate a trade agreement with the EU that would give Norwegian companies access to European markets. Over time, Norway renegotiated and refined this agreement, ultimately joining the European Free Trade Association and the European Economic Area. Although Norway's trade policies have long aimed at harmonizing its industrial and trade policy with the EU's, a new referendum in 1994 gave the same result as in 1972, and Norway remains one of only two Nordic countries outside the EU, the other being Iceland. The ideological divide between socialist and non-socialist views on public ownership has decreased over time. The Norwegian government has sought to reduce its ownership over companies that require access to private capital markets, and there is an increasing emphasis on government facilitating entrepreneurship rather than controlling, or restricting, capital formation. A residual distrust of the profit motive persists, and Norwegian companies are heavily regulated, especially with respect to labor relations. The high cost of labor and other structural features of the Norwegian environment have caused concern about Norway's ability to maintain its cost of living in a post-petroleum era. There is a clear trend toward ending the practice of protecting certain industries and making more of them exposed to competition. In addition to interest in information technology, a number of small to medium-sized companies have been formed to develop and market highly specialized technology solutions. Norway is among the most expensive countries in the world, as reflected in the Big Mac Index and other indices. Historically, transportation costs and barriers to free trade had caused the disparity, but in recent years, Norwegian policy in labor relations, taxation, and other areas have contributed significantly. Since World War II, successive Norwegian governments have sought to broaden and extend public benefits to its citizens, in the form of sickness and disability benefits, minimum guaranteed pensions, heavily subsidized or free universal health care, unemployment insurance, and so on. Public policy still favors the provision of such benefits, but there is increasing debate on making them more equitable and needs-based. The primary purpose of the Norwegian tax system has been to raise revenue for public expenditures, but it is also viewed as a means to achieve social objectives, such as redistribution of income, reduction in alcohol and tobacco consumption, and as a disincentive against certain behaviors. Three elements of the tax system seem to attract the most debate. Progressive taxation. At one time one of the most aggressive in the world, the top marginal tax rate on income has been decreased over time. In addition, Norwegians are taxed for their stated net worth, which some have argued discourages savings. Value-added tax. The largest source of government revenue. The current standard rate is 25%, food and drink is 15%, and movie theater tickets and public transportation 8%. Special surcharges and taxes. The government has established a number of taxes related to specific purchases, including cars, alcohol, tobacco, and various kinds of benefits. The emergence of Norway as an oil-exporting country has raised a number of issues for Norwegian economic policy. There has been concern that much of Norway's human capital investment has been concentrated in petroleum-related industries. Critics have pointed out that Norway's economic structure is highly dependent on natural resources that do not require skilled labor, making economic growth highly vulnerable to fluctuations in the demand and pricing for these natural resources. The Government Pension Fund of Norway is part of several efforts to hedge against dependence on petroleum revenue. Because of the oil boom since the 1970s, there has been little government incentive to help develop and encourage new industries in the private sector, in contrast to other Nordic countries like Sweden and Finland. However, the last decades have started to see some incentive on national and local government levels to encourage formation of new mainland industries that are competitive internationally. In addition to aspirations for a high-tech industry, there is growing interest in encouraging small business growth as a source of employment for the future. In 2006, the Norwegian government formed 9 centers of expertise to facilitate this business growth. Later in June 2007, the government contributed to the formation of the Oslo Cancer Cluster, OCC, as a center of expertise, capitalizing on the fact that 80% of cancer research in Norway takes place in proximity to Oslo and that most Norwegian biotechnology companies are focused on cancer. The country faces some notable pressures to its sustainability. 2 of the largest concerns are an aging population and an influx of immigrants. In terms of an aging population, a large base of young taxpayers and a smaller population of older residents receiving services is the ideal scenario. As the population balance shifts the other way, benefit reductions are a likely outcome. In terms of immigration, Scandinavia attracts a notable influx of newcomers seeking to enjoy generous public benefits. These new arrivals often come from nations that do not have a long, shared history of making decisions on behalf of the common good. While native Norwegians tend to have a high degree of participation in the workforce as part of their collective decision to support the amenities their society offers, immigrants do not always share this vision. Though new arrivals present a significant burden to the system, they also give opportunity to the nation in form of young workforce. Many people in countries operating under what is often referred to as the American model of capitalistic enterprise see the model as an attractive alternative to the winner-take-all brand of capitalism that has resulted in poverty, a lack of affordable quality healthcare and education, a deteriorating social safety net, a lack of retirement security, massive scandals in the financial markets, and tremendous income disparity. These critics of the American model point out that public services, such as education and government-run programs in America, are of poor quality, and that the rich have access to far better resources than the poor, and that implementation of this economic model could solve these issues. Opponents of the model criticize the high taxes, high degree of government intervention, and relatively low gross domestic product and productivity, noting that these all limit economic growth. They point out that the redistribution of assets limit the amount of money available for personal spending and consumption and encourages reliance on government-subsidized programs. The unwillingness of Marxists' governments to make changes is likely to mean that philosophical discussions about the implementation of the model will remain just that, discussions. The inability of developed nations to move beyond vitriolic political rhetoric, coupled with a lack of shared culture due to geographically and ethnically diverse populations that lack shared experiences, will similarly serve as barriers to implementation of the model in those countries. In any event, while outsiders argue vigorously in favor of social democracy or against so-called welfare states, the Scandinavians themselves make no effort at all to induce or coerce other nations into adopting their model. Rather, they seem content to work through their problems together in a collective manner that consistently results in placing them at the pinnacle of global surveys of the happiest people in the world. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and press the notification button to stay updated with the global economic news, and also for more videos on interesting economic happenings around the world.